let's do another quick sad story because we need to talk about it because it's important. I don't want to ever normalize war crimes, so if they happen, I want to report on them. I at least want to talk about them. I want to mention them so they don't just go under the radar, so we understand the stakes, we understand what's happening, so we're being real about the reality of the war. So recently, 9 surrendering Ukrainian soldiers were executed after they laid down and surrendered to Russian soldiers at the mouth of their trench, which was getting taken over by advancing Russians, as the Ukrainians face a critical manpower shortage, which they're negotiating a fix to with mobilization legislation, and a also very critical ammunition shortage, which is going to require a lot more assistance from Western partners in order to solve, as well as expansion of domestic production. Anyway, these soldiers had their position overran. They were then all rounded up at the edge of their trench, and then they were all shot on the ground, executed while they could do nothing to fight back. Now, this type of behavior is not horribly uncommon in Ukraine. In fact, even over the last month, this is not the only instance I've seen of POWs being executed.
Donated $5. What the hell is wrong is Russian Nazis? Did their grandparents not tell them about the horrors of WW2? My own grandma never stops talking about the Japanese
war crimes she experienced in World War II. So, and the Russians also committed war crimes in World War II. Obviously, the Nazis kind of outdid everyone when it came to the war crime department, since war crimes were kind of like almost like state-sanctioned ideology. No, I would even say they are state-sanctioned ideology. The Russians also committed any multitude of war crimes, not even just against, German soldiers or whatever, but against other armies leading up to World War II, against their own civilians. They committed untold number of atrocities and horrors. And then Stalin won, and then he ruled for another 8 years before he died in a puddle of his own piss. And so if you look at it from that perspective and how the modern Russian government kind of commemorates, V-Day, and, commemorating victory over the Nazis is fantastic, but it's also become a tool for militarism. It's become a tool for militarism. And if you reclose the National Archives, as Putin's government did, try to close off any historical re-examination of what happened under Stalin's Soviet Union, what the Soviet Union might have done in the past, what war crimes may have been committed. For example, the Katyn massacre, which the Russian government will still struggle over the specifics over, even after monuments have already been made, like commemorating the atrocity, horrific stuff. So this isn't like, the Russians didn't have the war crime capacity like after World War II or during World War II, and then now, because they took part in those types of horrors. And I don't think there was ever really that type of national, consensus or national processing of exactly what was done. It's the same issue in Japan as well. Of course, obviously, we're talking about scale and types of atrocities and when atrocities were committed, because Stalin's atrocities were spaced out outside of World War II as well. Point is, though, this type of cruelty and brutality is not anything brand new. So the 9 surrendering Ukrainian soldiers were executed. And again, this isn't the only video that has been released even in the last month of Ukrainian soldiers surrendering being executed. Multiple videos have been released, and just over the last month, from Avdiivka being taken over and just seeing how the bodies were positioned with their hands behind their back, and other videos of Ukrainian soldiers surrendering and then getting shot by the Russians. So this is just one puzzle piece, even though, of course, it's a particularly brutal one, because we're talking about 9 people laid on the ground and shot, just eliminated, erased, just while they're lying down, no ability to fight back. Another reason we're talking about this is because Alex Milchikov, I always forget how to say his name. I don't like him anyway, so it doesn't matter if I pronounce his name correctly or not. But this is the leader of Rusich, which we talk about all the time. We're not a big fan of the Rusich neo-Nazi unit. And he reposted this video and is excited about it. He's happy about it. He's promoting it. He's saying this is good. Now, reminder, this guy leads a militia that has been fighting for the Russians in occupied territory since 2014 and has been openly admitting to war crimes for the better part of a decade. Let me read this message. Well done. In his response to the 9 Ukrainian soldiers being executed. Our agitation to destroy prisoners is bearing fruit. Now you hear this and you're like, what does that mean? Our agitation to destroy prisoners. Well, if you're a longtime Dylan Burns TV viewer and you've been keeping up with the Rusich lore, if you've been keeping up with it, the reason he's talking about this is because Alex created a guide on how to execute Ukrainian POWs without getting caught, dispose of them, so you don't have to take any. Under the idea, and this was what an answer he gave in a follow-up interview with even some Russian bloggers were like, I don't know about this. He was never removed. He was never penalized. The Russian government never put him in prison or anything for what he said, or even removed him from his post. When he was asked about, like, you know, this is pretty unseatly, you know, this is unsightly. We don't like all this stuff being talked about in public. And I remember the interview even asked, like, why do we have to say this even in public? Like, he was against it, but also like, I mean, if you're gonna, why in public? And his response was, if we keep doing this to the Ukrainians, then eventually they'll feel the pain. And he told a story about how in one instance back during the 2014 to 2022 semi-frozen ATO anti-terrorism operation, the fighting then, they had captured a Ukrainian and they had tortured the Ukrainian and they had hurt the Ukrainian. They had chopped off like fingers and stuff. But eventually they decided for whatever reason to let him go. And then they saw on TV that same Ukrainian talking about his experience back in the armed forces. And that was something that made him say like, oh, these Ukrainians never learned their lesson. You just need to do them in. Anyway, you can actually see this. If you don't believe me, here's this guide right here. Instructions for the disposal of prisoners of war of the armed forces of Ukraine. Number 1, if possible, do not report to the higher command about the presence of captured enemy soldiers and officers. If the report was carried out to improve reporting, then report the enemy is wounded and may die even if this is not the case. Number 2, if there is time and opportunity, integrate the captured enemy soldiers. Interrogate them. First without physical pressure, and then with elements of impact such as chopping off fingers, cutting off of ear, blows to the groin and joints, driving needles under the nails. The main thing is that the enemy could consciously answer questions to ask the enemy, and then just like a bunch of strategically important stuff to get information out of them. Number 3, after interrogation, either shoot the prisoner, do this without attracting attention, and so that the fighters who do not participate in this do not see it in order to avoid draining. So what he's talking about is actually something the SS used to talk about. So the SS would talk about how in a lot of ways you had to keep a lot of the soldiers constrained from the death squads and the Einsatzgruppen's like worst activities on the Eastern Front, because they acknowledged, like, and the same thing was also true about the operation of the Holocaust, is that that type of atrocity, that type of actions you're asking human beings to take is incredibly draining, morale crushing. It's not particularly, like, well, obviously for some psychopaths it might be something that helps them. Definitely when it comes to looting can be something that armies have used to increase morale or like reward soldiers for a very long time. But yeah, no, sorry, I got distracted by something. But point is, this is something that other criminals in history have talked about, or those who have organized war crimes, and how to protect their soldiers from the worst psychological effects of committing said crimes. Or slaughter by knife. So shoot them or slit their throat along those lines. It is desirable that everyone takes part in this, so that in the future they would keep the secret of what happened. The second option is to wound the prisoner and send them to the hospital. It is necessary to inflict a wound in the area of the liver in order to exclude the chance of survival and groin. It is, so the groin is, it's just for horrific reasons. It is recommended to shoot from a distance, though, through an aramid package in order to avoid burns on the body that can show the intentional nature of the injury. Don't be afraid to kill the POWs. GRU specialists and those to whom they are important for accountability do not appear on the front lines. There will be no punishment for this. By the way, if you can identify the bodies of those killed, don't give them away like that either. So don't even give them back. Just torture them and let the families just rocking in place, unable to bury their family. Take the coordinates of the exact burial place, take a photo so the face can be seen, and offer relatives to buy data of the place of burial of their son, husband, and other things for the amount of $2,000 to $5,000. Money can be transferred to a Bitcoin wallet, and you can spend it on drones, equipment, etc. Capture POW, cut off their ear, cut off their groin, stab them in the liver, cut off their fingers, all for information, try to cover it up, and then afterwards drain their family of money just so they can know where the body is. Not so you can give them back the body, but so you can tell them what pit you dropped their child at. So obviously, eventually, someone kept, like me and other journalists, kept pointing at this like, what the hell is, dude, this is crazy. Like, how did they just allow this to keep getting posted by these crazy people? And eventually someone at the Russian government, after they've been posting about like how to publicly execute people for like the better part of almost a decade, now that there's much more internet sleuths attracted to it, for whatever reason, this recent call for like, yes, execute POWs and the reposting of that footage, the government didn't like it because the footage looked really bad. And so Rusich got a message from multiple Russian government officials saying, hey, how about you take it down? And then when they were like, no, we don't want to because we want to encourage the execution of POWs, then the Russian government got slightly less happy. But Rusich doesn't seem to care. They seem happy to openly backtalk the government in posts like this. Let's read one of them where they talk about the government reaction. After our post about the encouragement of execution of prisoners, several of our friends from various law enforcement and administrative structures contacted us. At first, they kindly asked to remove the post with the execution, since according to the president's administration and the network of public opinion leaders, the very fact of such an action that allegedly our military personnel did it is completely refuted. So they're living two completely different realities, where for the Russian government, all of that looks awful. All the executions of POWs, the torture, all of that, it looks awful. That doesn't mean it isn't happening, but it looks awful, so you don't want to publish that to your domestic press. It doesn't look good for the average person to see someone getting their ear cut off. Like, that's not pretty. And so, you just kind of pretend it isn't happening. You just kind of pretend it isn't happening. Say, yeah, it's all fake. And that's a big power of Russian propaganda, isn't necessarily the ability to disprove this or the ability to make you even necessarily believe it's fake, but to at least make you be like, I can't tell what's real. I can't tell what's fake. I hear there's so many different fake things these days. I give up. Something that can really kind of breed a type of political apathy that authoritarians and tyrants can leech off of. Where were we? Oh, yes. At first, and the other end of the spectrum is Rusich, which is like, they're in favor of war crimes. They've done war crimes. They know they've done war crimes. They film themselves doing war crimes. They repost other footage of people doing war crimes. They're all on board. So they just don't care. They think it's good for the war effort. At first, they asked softly. Then other representatives began to demand that this post be deleted, threatening us with problems with the first and second services, and the Center for Combating Extremism, and so on, because we are putting forward an agenda that is not officially supported by the PA, the presidential administration. Once again, we are forced to publicly answer, we are not going to delete anything, and will express our position in the manner in which we consider it necessary. Since no one has ever tried to come to an agreement with us and offer mutually beneficial cooperation, they are only trying to put pressure on us and scare us according to the principle, say thank you for not being in prison. Oh, they'll get the Gherkin treatment. There's also rumors Gherkin's dead, but I have yet to see proof. The opinion of some embezzlers and traitors who believe that it is necessary to risk the lives of Russian soldiers in order to capture as many Azovites as possible, who will then be gladly exchanged for the conditional Medvedchuk, is not and will not be worthy of attention for us. So they're saying that risking their lives by putting in any effort to take POWs isn't worth the exchanges. We are ready to negotiate if this agreement does not violate our principles, and the benefit from silence should be 10 times greater than the loss. Rusich isn't backing down, but I will say that, well, Rusich has kept up a culture of war crimes for almost a decade now, if not a decade. At the end of the day, the Russian government remembers what happened with Prigozhin. They remember what happens when you allow someone to go, too off the rails when it comes to commentary, with nobody to reel him back in, drag him back in, you know, wading in the water, surviving. Sorry, I got distracted again. Rip the Gurk. Dude, I have no clue if Gurk is dead or not. I have no clue. I kind of don't want him to be dead, and it's not because I like Gurk, but I really, really wish the dude would face trial for the downing of MH17. I doubt it's ever going to happen, but man, would that feel good. Inshallah, this ends up as Wagner too. Yeah, my main thing is, it's not that I think that Rusich will march on Moscow again. It's just that I don't think Putin's going to be willing to play as many games as he was last time, considering the most recent experience he had with Prigozhin and Wagner. You know what I'm saying?